city of Los Angeles is a dream destination for many to visit and many to find a residency in. But Los Angeles County's affordable housing and cost of living crisis is more complex than many think. The housing and cost of living crisis plaguing Los Angeles is deeply interconnected with the transportation affordability, urban planning, sustainability efforts, which impacts the city's renters, low-income households, and future homebuyers. As housing costs continue to rise, critical access to reliable and affordable public transportation becomes essential to having economic mobility within a large metropolis. And organizations like Move LA advocate policies linking transit-oriented development and mixed-income housing. The argument between government policies focusing on economic growth and development and grassroots activism demanding urban planning that considers long-term affordability and sustainability. While some may support transit and affordable housing near job centers, others resist such projects due to economic concerns, zoning regulations, or objections to new development. Traffic congestion, accessibility to employment, and housing prices, a study of single-family housing in Los Angeles County by Yu-Ting Hao shows the effect of urban planning and transportation accessibility on housing affordability in Los Angeles. The analysis highlights that homeowners are willing to pay more to live near job centers, strengthening the fact that the cost of living is linked to accessibility and not simply housing expenses. This supports the argument that affordable housing and public transportation must be integrated with a view of facilitating economic mobility for middle and low-income households. The research shows that middle-income households are doably hit by congestion-driven price increases, lacking the purchasing power of higher-income buyers, but placing a greater value on commuting efficiency than lower-income households. This is related to the balance between state-level economic growth and neighborhood long-term sustainability. Not following through on transit-oriented housing policy will keep forcing vulnerable populations into larger commutes or increased costs. With Los Angeles standing ready to host the 2028 Olympics, investments in infrastructure today will either exacerbate housing inequality by increasing costs to high accessibility neighborhoods or set the stage for more sustainable and equitable urban future. Los Angeles has faced devastating effects of wildfires in recent weeks, which is a result of WUI development in the Santa Monica Mountains and Mount Wilson. Rational Geographies of Urban Unsustainability, the Entanglement of California's Housing Crisis with WUI Growth and Climate Change by Miriam Greenberg says how the housing crisis in California is closely connected to the urban sprawl, lower income displacement, and ex-urban environmental risks. The study uncovers how one-third of all California homes live in what is now considered fire-prone wildland-urban interface, or WUI, areas, which make up nearly 1.5 million of the new homes built over the last 30 years. One of the leading factors in the transition to WUI areas is the rising housing costs in urban areas, which are causing low-income households to move into fire-prone areas. Greenberg argues that the pattern of displacement is not an economic issue, but a climate injustice concern, as marginalized communities are being disproportionately faced with the consequences of poor urban planning and climate change. Although Los Angeles is the city of angels and a destination for many, not everyone can support themselves and their families once they settle here. Severe housing cost burden and low-income children's exposure to adverse experiences, a cross-sectional survey of the WIC participants in Los Angeles County by Nairobi and Whaley, highlight the impact of high housing costs on lower-income households, and particularly on young children's well-being and development. The study found that 16% of lower-income children in Los Angeles County experience cost of living and housing expenses, making them 3 times more likely to then experience 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. ACEs, including food insecurity, homelessness, and parental unemployment, these stressors can lead to long-term consequences on a child's mental and physical health, but can also lead to academic performance issues. Raising housing costs and displacement will only worsen this issue, further entrenching economic inequality and stifling potential moving forward. Addressing Los Angeles' affordability crisis is not a matter of providing housing. It is about ensuring equitable access to healthy, secure environments where children and families can thrive. Accessibility to affordable housing in Los Angeles affects every aspect of the city runs, because without workers, the city cannot function. Imaginaries from Abolition University to University Abolition by Eula Gillich and Tony Boardman underlines how housing affordability is bound up with labor rights and economic stability, impacting not just individual workers, but the operation of the entire city. The 2019-2020 UC Santa Cruz Wildcat strike is indicative of larger issues for labor in Los Angeles, where the rising cost of living forces workers to either struggle to make do with unaffordable rent or flee the city for cheaper alternatives. It is an argument that wages and housing policy have to be solved simultaneously, since unaffordable housing erodes the city's labor and critical services. The heavy reliance on low-wage workers, especially in the education and service industries, point to a hidden imbalance that allows economic growth to continue at the expenses of the workers' well-being. Without fair wages, strong tenant protections, and affordable housing connected to the public transit, cities like Los Angeles will keep facing worker displacement, labor shortages, and growing inequality, putting the city's long-term stability at risk. Los Angeles faces rising housing costs and transportation challenges, making affordability a major issue for many people living in the city. Move LA is a nonprofit organization that works to promote sustainable and fair urban development, focusing on how housing affordability, public transportation, and city planning are all connected. Move LA points out that the lack of affordable and reliable transportation in Los Angeles adds to the financial struggles of middle and low-income households. One of their key initiatives is transit-oriented development, which pushes for affordable housing to be built alongside busy transit corridors to improve mobility across the city. Move LA believes affordable housing and dependable public transportation must go hand in hand to give people access to jobs and opportunities while preventing displacement. Their policies like Measure ULA, which increases renter support and strengthens tenant protections, show how the cost of living crisis in Los Angeles is closely tied to both transit access and sustainable infrastructure. Los Angeles has been facing increased traffic congestion in the recent past, which is also aggravating the already high cost of living and housing affordability crisis. Traffic congestion is getting worse by LA Progressive, described how increased commute times are a direct result of bad urban planning, low degree of public transportation, and unaffordability of housing close to workplaces. The report acknowledges that employees commuting from regions such as Palmdale represent some of the largest commuting workers in the country, spending over 90 minutes in both directions on a daily basis because they cannot afford to reside near their individual workplaces. A primary reason for the increasing congestion is the relocation of lower-income families from inner-city areas to outer suburban neighborhoods, where the home is still affordable to their economies, but accessibility declines. LA Progressive argues that this is not an issue merely of basic traffic congestion, but a fundamental failure of the transit and housing policy that disproportionately injures the working class and economically disadvantaged individuals, forcing them into unviable commuting agreements and exuberating already existing economic disparities. The Los Angeles County Development Authority, LACDA, plays a key role in tackling the challenges of urban development and housing affordability in Los Angeles County. Founded in 1938, LACDA is not only one of the oldest public housing authorities in the county, but also the largest provider of affordable housing in the city. Its main focus is building, improving, and developing affordable homes, especially for low-income families and people with special needs. LACDA runs several important programs, including the HOME program, which funds affordable housing projects, and the LA County Housing Initiative Fund, which helps cover the cost of acquiring and preparing new housing developments. Through these efforts, LACDA works to ease the housing crisis that hits low and moderate income families the hardest, promoting a more sustainable and inclusive approach to urban growth throughout the city. State of the City, addressed by Mayor Karen Bass, tackled LA's housing deficit and made a call to action. She spearheaded LA for LA, a call to private and philanthropic investment to accelerate the production of affordable housing within the city.
LA Mayor Karen Bass delivering her State of the City address at City Hall today. She covered important topics, including the city's budget deficit, the continued homelessness crisis, and violent crime. Eyewitness News reporter Sophie Flay live in downtown LA with more on the mayor's message to Angelenos. Sophie.
Mark, a strong message of unity coming from LA Mayor Karen Bass, introducing new initiatives tonight, but saying city officials need to focus on working together to move this city forward.
We are turning away from the status quo. We are looking forward and making change.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass addressing Angelenos from City Hall tonight.
Thousands more unhoused Angelenos came inside, and homicide and violent crime came down last year.
In the crowd, folks that have benefited from Bass's homelessness initiative, Inside Safe, which takes the unhoused and provides temporary shelter, like this man who was living in a tent under the 210 freeway 2 weeks ago.
Now I'm in a motel off the street, so I can shower every day, shave, all the provisions that someone might have at home that you take for granted.
And this woman whose child attends Larchmont Charter School, a school in Hollywood with a homeless encampment that blocked the sidewalk, forcing children to walk in the street. After months of parents begging the city for help, the Inside Safe program moved 40 people indoors.
Housing affordability in Los Angeles is not just about economics. It's a much bigger crisis tied to labor rights, social inequality, climate risks, and access to transportation. The growing gap between wages and housing costs has created ongoing challenges, from childhood hardships to unfair labor conditions and even climate dangers, as people are pushed into fire-prone areas. Traffic congestion makes the problem worse by limiting access to jobs and driving up housing prices in areas close to employment, especially hurting middle-income families. The spread of housing into fire-prone regions is the direct result of unaffordable housing in the city, forcing many people into dangerous, unsustainable living conditions. Without real change, these problems will continue to push low-income families into poverty, underpay workers, and increase climate risks, making Los Angeles harder to live in for many. To fix this, housing must be seen as not a social good, but as essential for economic stability, environmental safety, and fair access to jobs.